Hello, my name is Ruth, and I'm going to start by singing a song called The Ghost of Willie-O, which I got from the singing of Donal Maguire, and it's an old ballad. Parts of it would go back to the 1600s probably. So. Here's a health to all true lovers, and to my own, though where'er she be. This very night I shall be with her, though many's the mile of you are from me, and though the night be as dark as a dungeon, and not a star to be seen above, I'll be guided without a stumble into the arms of the one I love. He stepped up to her bedroom window and kneeled him low down upon a stone. He's whispered quietly through a pane being broken, my dearest dear, do you lie alone? She raised her head from her down soft pillow, and silently she let him in. They kissed, shook hands, and embraced each other until the long night was at its end. And when the long night was past and over, and the grey cock began to crow, this young man rose and put on his clothing, saying, my dearest dear, now I must go. Oh, Willie dear, where are those blushes that you wore so many years ago? My dearest dear, the cold clay has changed them, for I am the ghost of your Willie-O. For 7 long years I've been constant writing to the far-off Bay of Biscay, oh, till cruel death has brought, and sir, with you the ghost of my Willio, the Wicklow mountains I most cross over, the wild, wild ocean I will roam, the burning plains I'll cross for pleasure, for I am the ghost of your Willio. No.
Hello and welcome to Sligo Library and to the Word online and live here in the library building for our January edition of the Word. This is in association with the BA in Writing and Literature with ATU Sligo. We are delighted to have Florence Gillan as our first guest for 2023. Florence Gillan is a retired teacher who lives in the rolling hills of County Down with her husband, 2 dogs and a cat. She left her native Sligo but always has a yen for the majesty of Ben Bulben. She's had a lifelong passion for writing, and her debut novel, Let Them Lie, a dark psychological thriller, was released in October 2023 and has certainly been very popular in Sligo Central Library, Sligo Library, with all our readers. Florence will be in conversation tonight with Una Mannion of the BA in Writing and Literature at ATU Sligo. Una Mannion is a writer and a teacher, and her debut novel, A Crooked Tree, was published in 2021. She's the programme chair of the Writing and Literature BA at ATU Sligo. This will be followed by an audience Q&A, which you're all welcome to take part in tonight, and then our open mic. Music tonight is with the lovely Ruth Clinton, who just sang for us just there, who was just absolutely amazing. Ruth Clinton is an artist, writer and musician from County Dublin, and she's living in Sligo now. She performs with traditional singing group Landless as well as experimental folk duo Poor Creature. She's a founding member of the Night Before Larry Got Stretched singing session, and she also plays at a weekly old time session in Sligo town, which I think we'll want more details of, please, if that's okay. So our open mic tonight will be facilitated by Hazel O'Grady, who's been helping us with the Word this month from ATU Sligo. And I just want to officially hand you over now to Una and Florence and say thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle and Ruth. That was just stunning, and thank you so much. Just beautiful. When Florence and I were talking just before this started, she just mentioned how much time she spent in this space as a child. And I remember we had Declan Burke here before, and he talked about how this was his cathedral. And it's so lovely to welcome you home to Sligo to talk about your debut novel. The book has received incredible accolades. It's been described as a dark and gripping debut, propulsive, a must-read, a dark, compulsive page-turner, a captivating and creepy tale. I was struck by the novel's psychological complexity, how people become damaged, how secrets and shame are carried intergenerationally. I was teaching Greek theater earlier today. Some of the students are here, and I was thinking about how Greek, in a way, it is set in Sligo, but those elements of Greek tragedy, of having to shoulder the sins of the father, and about sort of this pursuit of truth, even to the point where it might destroy you, and not giving up. You're really, really welcome, Florence, and I'm hoping that we might kick off with you, starting with a reading. I think Florence will set the scene a little bit for us, but to give a kind of overview of how the book begins. Our narrator is Aoife O'Driscoll. She's a teacher from County Sligo. She's teaching in Dublin. She's engaged to be married, and she travels home at the start of the novel for her father's anniversary. He's been dead for 20 years.
Thank you, Una. Yes, at this stage, Aoife has come home. It's the day of her father's anniversary, but sadly that day, the family dog goes missing and is found dead. And the Polish farm worker who's helping Sam run the farm, he is basically going to dig a hole and bury the dog. So to pass the time until the anniversary mass that evening, Aoife decides to help out, and she's basically weeding the garden and chatting to Carl, the farmhand, and they share a cup of coffee and a bit of gingerbread cake, and they're getting on well, but the time comes when they have to get back to work. So I'll just basically read from this point. Rolling up her sleeves, she started on the next bed. It was standing up better to the weeds. The shrubs here were better established. As she worked, she daydreamed. When her father was alive, he set her the task of weeding. She used to imagine the weeds were an enemy, launching an assault on a village, and she was a mercenary who was going to liberate the poor villagers. She allowed herself to slip back into this childish fantasy, until she noticed it wasn't only the weeds she was ripping out in her enthusiasm. Her thoughts turned to her wedding. She still hadn't got a dress. All they had done was to book a church, the hotel, and of course the band. They would have to organise themselves, or things would end up in a shambles. Would Kate be willing to help? The 4-year age gap separating them seemed less now that they were adults. It would be nice to spend more time together. It was hard to get Kate on her own. She was so busy with the kids and Kenny. Her sister had always been there to help her through the minor crises of adolescence. She handed over money when rent was short in college and gave gentle advice if asked. But it struck her how little she knew about her sister. For example, was Kate happy in her marriage? Married at 20 and a mother by 21, what did Kate see in Kenny? He was pleasant enough, but he seemed such a nonentity. He mooched around, found a perch, and blended into the background. Trying to engage him in conversation was agonisingly tedious. The only memorable conversation they had was about music. Unlike her, he was a big country music fan and was amazingly knowledgeable about it. She had been so startled by his enthusiasm and passion for the genre that she faked interest too. It was a revelation to hear him talk so much and with such enthusiasm. The downside of that conversation was his insistence on gifting her with country music CDs and albums for subsequent birthdays and Christmas. Connor had thought she was a fan after seeing her collection. She was astounded one day to hear Kate say how fond Kenny was of her. Maybe she should make more of an effort to get to know him better. After all, there must be more to him than his taste in music. As she continued to work, her back ached. Standing up to stretch, she noticed Carl staring into the hole he was digging. Then he turned his head and beckoned to her energetically. Glad of an excuse to abandon the weeding, she ambled over. "See what I have found," he said, pointing down. She looked and saw the skeletal remains of a dog, and beside it a package wrapped in black polythene, half covered in clay. It must have been where Polly, their dad's old dog, was buried. Excitement swept over her. What could the package be? "Hurry, Carl, lift it out." He jumped down into the pit and, scrambling about, scraped the package free and passed it up. She grabbed it eagerly, dying to examine it, but offered him a hand out of the deep pit. He shook his head and scrambled up, brushing mud from his clothes. She carried the box over to the bench where she'd just lately enjoyed her tea break. Eagerly, she peeled off the tightly wrapped black plastic covering. It revealed what appeared to be a battered yellow biscuit tin. Its colour was faded by long immersion in wet clay, but it kept a recognisably buttery tinge. The eroded lettering on the tin was long past recognition. Her excitement subsided. It was too much to expect it to be a treasure trove. Probably Kate or Sam had buried a time capsule as the children, and it had been long forgotten. Still, it was buried too deeply, surely, to be the work of children. Her attempts to open it were defeated as it was rusted shut. She called out to Carl, who was watching from beside the grave. "Do you have a knife?" Carol patted down his pockets and produced a small penknife. She used the sharp blade to prise the lid open. It took a bit of an effort, and she squealed as she slit her thumb. Bright blood dripped over the tin, but the lid loosened, and she felt it give.
Thank you. So I want this becomes sort of the catalyst for the remainder of the novel. And before we talk about what's in that box, there's a few things I was interested in. One is the fact that you made a decision to set the novel in Sligo, and I was wondering if you could talk initially about that decision in setting it on a farm in North Sligo, and why, and instead of choosing a fictional place, to set it in an actual place.
I don't think I actually set out to set it in Sligo. I think it sort of, I found myself writing things and I thought, that beach or that lane or road or walk, that's somewhere I remember from being a child. That's Sligo, basically. So I kind of realised without even knowing it that I was writing about Sligo. And then the box that features in the story and that's on the cover of the book, that box is actually a box that belonged in my family. My father had it, and God knows it probably went back to his father. And it was a box in which maybe important documents were kept, wills, birth certs, that sort of thing. But it was kind of one of these things you don't touch. This is adult stuff. So after my mother died, I actually got possession of this box, and by that stage it just held sort of memorial cards and things like that. But I just thought, when I was thinking about this idea, the box, I don't know which came first, the box or the idea, but basically I knew when I started writing about this mysterious box that it was the box, and the fact that it was Sligo is what I knew. I think the memories you have as a child are so implanted in your head, and the places are so real, and I found myself sort of unconsciously just writing about them.
Yeah, so you could sort of walk down those roads in your imagination, or your feet would know it, kind
Yes.
of. Yeah.
Yes.
About the box, because the box is going to contain really disturbing information, and I was wondering about sort of the box as its metaphor for the title of your book is "Let Them Lie," but I guess our secrets and the past and the things we don't talk about and the things that are buried tend to surface,
Yes.
despite our efforts. And I guess, did you know from the beginning that you were interested in that idea? I guess I'm asking you about the title and how it connects to that.
It's funny, the book had many titles. It started off being The Box, and then it became The Anniversary. And then when the publishers basically weren't happy with the title and they wanted a different one, and I was racking my brains, and I was thinking of things like, Let Sleeping Dogs Lie, because I was thinking there's two dogs, like the Polly and Nell. And then I was chatting over with my son David, and he said, why don't you just call them Let Them Lie? Let the secrets lie, continue lying. So that sort of all melded together, and the minute I told my publisher that was the title I was thinking of, she instantly loved it, and she said, just on so many levels, it is what the book is about secrets and lies, about the choices you have to make, it just seemed to have a bit of, it just seemed perfect to me, it all came together, and I was so happy with it.
Yeah, I would agree, and I just something around that process. Just now that you've mentioned it, in terms of the editorial process you went through, was there a lot of were there a lot of drafts and changing, or was that?
By the time I had got my family to read it and my close friends to read it, and of course, I listened to their suggestions and ideas, and particularly my children were great at telling me things like, no young person would say this or that, so that was great. But in terms of the publishers, the main thing they were concerned about, apart from the title, was the ending. And there were actually, I think, 4 endings written. 2 before I actually got it to the publishers, and another 2 after I got it to the publishers. So it was very, and that's why I always thought, for anybody reading this book, it's that dilemma of what would you do in that situation. And I know what Aoife wanted to do, and what she would have felt was the right thing to do. But she also was in a family, and there were other people involved as well, and they had their viewpoint. And she had to listen to that. So the ending, I suppose, had to have the truth, not just of, doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing, but what is real to the characters, what made sense in terms of the characters.
I was reading one of your, I think it was an Amazon review. You have all these amazing reviews, and then one person was like, morally questionable.
Oh, yeah.
How could you end the book like this? But I think that's really interesting that the kind of closure you would like to think would happen isn't what the kind of decisions people make when they're in that situation, because there's like so many other people affected. So we're talking sort of cryptically about what's in the box, what gets discovered in the box. Yeah. And I don't think it's a spoiler to point out at the very beginning, she discovers very dark secrets about her father, and that he's kept a record of in the box.
Yes.
And that this is part of the conflict that is the trajectory of the novel. I'm wondering if you might read from just a little bit further on in the book.
Yes. Now, I suppose what I'm going to read, at this stage, Aoife has done a lot of investigating herself and finding out and really not wanting to believe that this whole thing was true. But at this stage, she's at home again. She's had her holidays from work, and she's gone home to spend time on the farm. And her annoying aunt Dolly, baby shows up, and she decides to pump her for information, and she learns about this event in her father's life whereby when he was very small, just about 3, he disappeared from the family home, and everyone was terrified something had happened to him. And so his dad, who's called Dada, went off looking for him and found him in a river, and he jumped into the river and rescued him, and basically he took ill and he died. And the mother, for some very warped reason, really blamed the child for the death. And so Aoife is very disturbed by this, but she's thinking maybe baby is exaggerating. So she rings another aunt of hers, Aunt Emma, to see if she could get a little bit of context on what happened. So Emma cleared her throat and sighed. I haven't thought about this for a long time. Aoife, it's typical of baby to drag past tragedies into the present. I bet she found a way of making this tragedy about herself too. Aoife said nothing and waited, forcing her aunt to speak. When Manus escaped from the garden, we were all worried sick. Dada raced over the road to find him. I think the river was the first place he headed. We weren't worried about the road because there wasn't much traffic then, except for the occasional tractor, not like nowadays. Anyway, Dada jumped into the river and rescued Manus. It wasn't deep, but for a 3-year-old like Manus, it would be lethal. Anyway, he brought him home. Mother was in a state and stripped Manus and wrapped him in a blanket, but Daddy was her chief concern. What was wrong with him? Dada had a weak chest because of childhood illnesses, and of course he had asthma. Treatments weren't great then, and poor Dada had a severe attack a few hours later. He died that evening. Mother was distraught. She adored him. His death did something terrible to her. Baby is right that she blamed Manus for what happened. I remember her pulling him out of bed and shaking him and shouting terrible things at him. She even said that she wished he was dead. I know this sounds terrible, Aoife, but you must remember she was mad with grief. Eventually, my brothers calmed her down. Clarissa took Manus to stay with a neighbour until after the funeral. Oh God, Emma, he must have been traumatised. Perhaps you're right, Aoife, but in those days, people thought children were very resilient, and Manus seemed fine. Of course, he asked for his Dada, but the boys told him not to speak about him in front of Mother. Soon he was acting as usual. We didn't think it did Manus any lasting harm, and he never spoke about what happened. I think he was too young to understand. But Emma, did your mother continue to blame Dad for what happened? Yes, I suppose she did. She said nothing more to Manus, but she was harsh with him. That was why Clarissa made such a pet of him. She was always trying to make up for Mother's coldness. But that's child abuse, Emma, to lay all that on an innocent child. Did nobody reason with her, make her see that it was cruel to treat a child that way? Emma sighed. Aoife, you must understand. Those were different times. Malachy had a word, but it only made things worse. So Manus just kept out of her way. Over the years, I have realised that ours was not a happy family. Mother was a hard woman, but Aoife, our mother, had a tough upbringing. I learned later that she was in care for most of her early life. I think the only bit of happiness and normalcy she experienced was when she met Dada. When he was alive, she was happy, or as happy as she could be. Even as children, we knew he came first. It was from Dada that we got all the fun and affection. I remember she used to watch him play with us, and she looked so lost. I don't think she had ever experienced a normal childhood. Aoife listened in silence, and Emma, perhaps stung by the perceived judgment it contained, rushed on. Aoife, there was so much that happened in the past that you can't even understand. I know that Mother sounds hard, but she sounds like a monster, Emma, a monster that you all enabled. That's not fair on us or her. After all, after she died, I did a bit of digging into my mother's past, and I think her parents put her into care. I think they got rid of her because they thought she was bold, which back then meant she was interested in boys, but it may have meant that abuse was happening in her family. It was a strange time. Inconvenient people ended up in mental asylums, mother and baby homes, industrial schools and orphanages. She didn't have a good start in life, and the one person with whom she experienced a bond died. Look, I'm not saying what she did was right, but if she was a monster, others created her. I know you think we let Manus down, and you're right, we did, but we were in survival mode too. Try not to judge any of us too harshly. Besides, the sun came up for your dad. He met Agnes and they doted on each other. So in the end it all worked out well, didn't it? Aoife's eyes stung with tears. Yes, Emma, things worked out just fine in the end, she said as she ended the call.
Thank you, thank you. Well, one of the things that I think your book did in terms of so we see the grandmother's story, and while it doesn't excuse how she treats her son, we get a kind of insight into how difficult her background was. And then the reader is dealing with what's unfolding in this diary that's been kept, in this record that's been kept in the tin box, but simultaneously has these little vignettes of how difficult Manus's life was with a mother that withheld affection. Were you very conscious that you were trying to build a very empathic picture of him at one level, and at the other in the box is a monster? So we have everyone who speaks of him speaks so highly. Aoife's memories of him, he died when she was 10, are so positive. And was that a conscious decision about how to make a character nuanced? Or
yeah, I think it's because I don't believe that people are born monsters or born evil. I think that basically what happens in life can destroy you or warp you or turn you on a bad path, particularly if you're very young, and unless you're very lucky and meet the right people, it can leave you with maybe irreparable damage. And I suppose I wanted to get the idea that Manus his way of dealing with life didn't come from nowhere. And even there's a kind of symmetry in the sense that his mother had this awful upbringing and became a monster herself in her own way. And she had that lifeline of having, of meeting Manus's dad and falling madly in love with him, and, almost that redemption of having this chance at happiness. but it was snatched away from her by Manus, in a sense, even though he was a child. And then he grows up and he meets somebody who can give him the love that he lacked, from his mother. But again, he can't share. He can't. The minute that Agnes's attention turns even anyway from focusing on him, this rage in him has to be unleashed somewhere. But I think somewhere else in the book I did talk about the idea that if he had gone to America and if he had had a different opportunity, maybe things would have been different, or maybe he would have done the same thing. But I think he was a product of his childhood and his mother's childhood.
I actually found that aspect of his character, for some reason, it really disturbed me, that he would strike out and hurt the people he hurt when his wife was pregnant or had just had a baby, and that need, or that just needing all the attention all the time. And just, I don't know if it was this detail that was really unnerving.
I think it's to do with the silence. When Agnes had her babies, quite often she had a depression after them. And having suffered from postnatal depression myself, I can understand how you shut down and you have nothing to give. And I think that silence she had towards Manus reminded him again of how his mother punished him. And I think it triggered something in him and that he couldn't cope with. And then I think he started to get an enjoyment from what he was doing. But there's hints in the novel that there was things that happened earlier on as well. So it's, which I didn't really go into, and I'm not even sure myself what he did. And I never established what the lock of hair was about either, and I still don't know.
But Aoife guesses that it predates her
yes,
mother.
Yes, there was things happening. There was, I think he had to put his rage and his anger somewhere, and I think he took it out maybe on animals initially, and that's when she was doing her research into psychopaths, and she started, learning how sometimes they practice on animals. And I think there is that thing where he buries something in a field, and that was, to me, was an animal that he killed.
Can I ask you, I know the book has been positioned as like thriller or crime novel, and were you consciously writing a crime novel, or did you think you were writing something else and it's been positioned as that? Or
Absolutely. I did not think I was writing a crime novel. And in fact, when the publisher contacted me and she was talking about, it being on the shelves in the crime section, I went, what? And she said, well, what do you think you wrote? And for me, I didn't think of it as a crime novel. For me, it was like a really dark, messed up family drama. It was, and it was kind of like that ethical dilemma of what would you do if you discovered something so horrific that's part of your family? What would you do? It was. I think that question was the one that was kind of over and over in my head when I was writing it. So I obviously it is, there is crime in it, there is a murder in it, and I can see why it is what it is, but I can't say I consciously set out to do that, no.
I actually, for me as a reader, I think the most interesting aspect of the novel is the family's, the decision-making of the family and the burden on the children about what they're going to do with the knowledge that they have. And so for me, that was much more than what the father did, or that's all been done, but it was about how they managed that. And it was interesting to hear that you had all different outcomes.
Yeah.
Would you like to read, I think you had selected a piece where Aoife is beginning to really discover.
Yeah. Yes, Aoife has started to basically investigate. I think she's gone through the whole thing of trying to convince herself that this was a fantasy, that it was a work of fiction, that it was her father, you know, just acting out stuff in his head. But she's basically beginning to see, I'll just read it and see what you think. She thought about her explanation for her father's diary confession. If it was a fantasy, then what did the items in the box represent? She went back to her desk and looked at the innocuous biscuit tin again. It was old, and most of the lettering faded away. She couldn't tell the brand of biscuits. She removed its contents and examined them. The little dolphin earring was cheap and made of hard plastic. It was cute, but unremarkable. The cladder ring was a little dull, but she could tell that it was gold. Reluctantly, she tried it on her little finger. She shivered and wrenched it off. The scarf felt like silk, but it was synthetic. The colour was bright, gay against the cold metal of the box interior. She examined the tube of lipstick, a bright pink, but couldn't bring herself to rub it on her skin. The most sinister item was a lock of dark hair tied with a shoelace. Aoife desperately wanted to believe her reassuring explanation for the events described in the notebook. But her head presented her with insistent, nagging doubts. Unless she made some effort to find out who owned these items, she might never sleep again. She could at least find out if the girls went missing around the time of Sam's birth. She had all day to fill in, so why not investigate? Her laptop took a while powering up, and then she typed "Missing Women in Ireland" on the search engine. She clicked on a Garda website and saw lists of men and women missing in Ireland over several decades. As she read through the various cases, she felt sickened at the possibility that her father could be responsible for some of them. In recent years, many of the missing men and women were foreign nationals. What human tragedy lay behind their disappearances? She searched back through the years. 1978 was the year Sam was born, so she checked out that list. Her heart stopped when she saw the name Annika and looked at the smiling face of a young girl. That was the name her father mentioned in the diary. So the name in the diary was related to a real girl who went missing. Did that mean her father was responsible for her death? It would be comforting to believe he just borrowed from reality, but she could feel her hope ebbing. She stared at the beaming face and felt her stomach lurch as she noticed a dolphin earring dangling from one ear. Fighting the need to be physically sick, her unwilling eyes read over the details. The girl was Dutch. She went missing while backpacking in Ireland in April 1978. She scoured the internet for more details. She came across accounts in local and national newspapers. It all fitted. Her nationality, her name. God, even the dates fitted. Sam was born on the 3rd of April. Everything in the diary was true. Her mother was busy with her first child and had no time for her husband. He felt alienated and angry, and instead of showing his anger to Agnes or their child, he vented all his poison on an innocent stranger. This time, she couldn't hold back as the contents of her stomach met her teeth.
Thank you. This is probably a weird question, but I'm just curious, like when you were writing, did you find yourself, were you searching those kinds of dark, to see what does it look like or what comes up, or I guess it's a kind of morbid question, but did you find yourself researching around this?
Yes, I did, and I found it deeply unpleasant, I looked at some videos, and there's so much out there, documentaries about serial killers. There's even diaries of serial killers. And I remember looking at excerpts from one, and it was positively stomach churning, and it just felt unpleasant. And so I thought, no, I did do a certain amount of research, but I just thought, I almost felt like it just felt wrong on a level to keep on, delving into it. But yes, I did. I did feel I had to do something. And
in some ways, to me, the book isn't really about that. I mean, Aoife keeps pursuing and trying to understand what happened, but it seems like the drama really is within the dynamic of the immediate family.
Yes.
That
was the most painful bit to write, actually, was I found that whole thing between Sam and Kate and her. I actually could feel myself getting, stomach muscles clenching, and I found that very difficult.
Yeah.
Because I could each see their point of view, and
When they're arguing, when the three of them are arguing, I think it's the most tense moment in the book.
Yes. For me, it was definitely the most difficult to write.
And can I ask, when you submit, because we spoke earlier today, you mentioned that you had just the process of sending this to a publisher and what happened. I think you said that you'd years before sent something to Poolbeg, and then during COVID. So maybe could you tell us a little bit just about how, I guess a lot of our students who are writers would be interested in the journey that you took.
Well, first of all, I always wanted to write from I was a child. I loved reading, I loved telling stories, I loved writing. And in primary school, you got amazing sort of stories you could write and imaginative and whatever. And then I went to secondary school, and it was much more, about structure and punctuation and, a story having a beginning, a middle and an end and the paragraphs. And it sucked the joy out of it for me, and I think my imagination just went to sleep then. I just couldn't. So I stopped writing for a long time, except obviously I tried poetry, wrote really bad poetry when I was in college. And but at the back of my head, I always wanted to write. And I got it into my head that a story, you had to have your whole plot formed before you could write. And that blocked me for a long, long time, until somebody suggested I read Julie Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And part of that is you write morning pages, and it's just kind of stream of conscience stuff. And I did that, and I was saying to you earlier that I did it for 6 months, every morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock, in the dark. Couldn't read a word of it afterwards. I literally, sentences were all over the place on the page. But it unlocked something in me, and I started to write a novel. And I sent 50 pages of it off to Poolbeg. This was when I was about in my 40s. And they said they wanted to see the rest, and I very stupidly sent them the rest. Really wasn't ready. But I just panicked. I thought, if I wait, they'll change their mind. And of course, they ultimately didn't publish it. But it was some kind of validation for me that even the fact they wanted to see something. So I then tittered around with it, and then I got fed up with it, and then I got the idea for this story. But I parked it. I did a sort of a change in my work situation, and I just felt I just can only focus on one thing at a time. And so I parked it for a few more years, and then I retired, and COVID happened. And the initial idea, I just sat down every day for about 5 or 6 hours, and the story just almost told itself. Now it was badly written, but the story came out, and so I got family and friends to read it, and I did the painful, tedious, as you well know, drafting and redrafting, and then I sent it off to Poolbeg, because basically they had shown interest before, and I thought I'll try them first, and that's basically I went straight to a publisher. And 3 months later, when I was about to give up, I got word they wanted to see the rest of the manuscript. And then a week later, they were taking it to a publishing meeting, but don't get too excited yet. And then a week after that, they said, you have a 3-book deal. And I was crazy happy.
Brilliant. It's really refreshing. I just want to say, to hear you talk about the glitches and the bumps and the false starts, because I think probably everyone, anyone who's a writer in the room knows exactly what you're talking about. And somehow, when you were saying earlier, I was really struck that you just said once you stopped thinking about having to have the end, that having this idea of needing the full plot was actually an obstacle. Hugely.
Huge. And I don't know why I bought so much into that idea. Because so many, I've discovered now, I mean, I think 50% of writers plot, and a lot of people are like me. The other 50%, they basically just start maybe with an idea or a character, and it evolves. And obviously you have to plot, you have to, it has to have a structure at the end. But I didn't have to worry about that. I just thought, let's see what comes out. And then we can pull it into some kind of a shape.
And can I ask you, you've finished the next manuscript or a draft of the next?
I have a rough draft done, and it's very strange. When I wrote the first Let Them Lie, I wrote that really for myself. Okay, I hoped it would be published, but I wrote it to please myself. Whereas when you're writing your second book, you have to think about your audience, you have to think about the publisher, and is this what they're looking for? So it's and then you're having this thing, are you a one-hit wonder? So it's difficult. So I have it done. I don't know how good it is. Well, it's not good, it's rough, but I don't know whether the germ of the idea is what hopefully readers will like. So as I said, I've entrusted it to a few family members, and I've told them, don't speak to me, email me, because I'll go defensive. If somebody starts saying, stuff to me, I'll get defensive. So it's much better if you email it to me, then I can look at it, get upset, go away, come back, and then, so they've all promised faithfully they're not going to speak to me, they're going to email me.
The difficult second album, and
yes, so
it's good to have the boundaries. It's just when you were talking about secondary school earlier, I've met a number of your classmates are here in the audience tonight, which is amazing. What we might do is maybe turn over the microphone to a song before the open mic. Sorry. Ruth. Oh, sorry, but I didn't mean to end it. I would end so abruptly. Thank you so much for that, and we'll do the open questions in just a moment, and turn over to Ruth.
So I'm going to sing a song which I don't really sing, but I came across this a few years ago and bookmarked it for myself. It's from an old ballad sheet from the 1860s, and the reason it caught my attention, it's called The Lamentation of Thomas Nolan, is because it's a murder ballad, but the woman murders the man, which almost never happens in these old ballads. It's always the other way around. So it kind of caught my attention for that reason, but also because it's set, it mentions Sligo town, which is also a rare thing I found. So I thought, even though I don't really sing it, there couldn't be a more appropriate time to sing this song, and I did have to rewrite some of the words because I think whoever wrote it about halfway through just lost interest, and it got really bad, which is maybe why it hasn't been sung since the 1860s, but here we go. Anyway, again, it's back. Okay. Ye Christians all, both great and small, I hope you will draw near. A doleful lamentation I mean to let you hear, concerning a noble gentleman whose loss we do deplore. His name was Thomas Nolan, we'll never see him more. He being on a visit not far from Sligo town, with a noble lady of honour and renown. He began to court her, as plainly you may see. She had a razor in her hand, which proved his destiny. You have wounded me, fair lady, you have wounded me full sore. There was not a man in this world could love a false lady more. And when my mother hears of it, distracted she will run, for the losing of my company, all for her darling heard it say, "Oh, go and tell my coachman my carriage to prepare, for I must go to Dublin town, and he will take me there." And when she came to Dublin town, well, she made no delay. She went unto a sea captain her passage for to pay. She had 1,000 pounds in gold, and to him she did say, "I am bound to cross the raging seas, all to America." The captain, well, he looked at her, and these words to her did say, "Why are you going, fair lady, and what brought you this way?" She wrung her hands and tore her hair, cried, "Oh, I am undone. I murdered Thomas Nolan, not far from Sligo town. Oh, Captain, won't you pity me and sail this ship away? The policemen are chasing me, so please make no delay." The captain did as he would bid, and departed from the quay, resolved to bring this fair lady to the shores of America. When she was 5 days sailing, no comfort she could find, for Thomas Nolan haunted her by day and by night. He grasped his hands all round her waist and cast her to the deep, which closed her eyes perpetually in everlasting sleep.
Oh, I am sorry. So we'll open to the floor for questions from the audience for Florence. I think is there a roving mic? Yeah, there is a roving mic. So I invite you to ask questions.
Good evening. What I'd really like to ask is, I find that I kind of write in a similar vein to what you would write, the kind of what's in your novel. I suppose what I'd like to know is, do you sometimes find that you're either inhibited or it's kind of difficult with worrying what people might think you're writing, or the kind of thing that you're writing, what it kind of says about you? And if you do, how do you get past that? Thank you.
Oh,
sorry.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Because I think somebody has said of me recently, she must have a very dark, twisted mind. I don't think I actually consciously thought that until the book was published, and then I thought, oh my God, people are going to read this, and what are they going to think? But I think for me, it's just a story, and yeah, it's not even that I particularly, read dark, twisty things myself. This came out of me, obviously, so there is something there that's twisted, but I'm at peace with that. So, thank you.
Hi. What I really wanted to ask, because it's such a, I assume, a very difficult subject to write about, because it's so prominent in our society, and especially with this very sad history of how domestic abuse and abuse against women have been treated in Ireland. And I was wondering, since you said monsters are created, they're not born, how does the main character, the daughter, still, does she find the strength to hold her father accountable for all of this violence that he projected on other women? So just what I wanted to ask, because very often in the cases that we see in real life, all of this toxic masculine upbringing is usually held as a shield against accountability for the men who prosecute women in the way you portrayed in your book.
I'm just trying to think of the best way to answer that. There's a lot of bad things that have happened all over the world, but I suppose we have to deal with what has happened in our own country, and there's a lot of secrets that have remained buried, or secrets that are just coming out into the light of day. And there is also, this thing of so many, I suppose, in novels and in television programs, victims are females as well. And, it's that thing of, trying not to glorify something. I don't know if I'm really even answering your question, but it's a difficult subject, and it's a painful subject, and there's so much truth in it. And I think there isn't a family in the country that doesn't have some memory or somebody who disappeared or who ended up in a mental institution, or there was somebody that something happened to, and we just don't know. And it's that people keep a lid on it and keep quiet about it, and of course that sort of perpetuates it. I think the only way, for things to heal is if things are brought into the light, even if that is extremely painful. But that's my thinking on it. I think it's better, in a way, not to let things lie. I don't know, does that answer your question at all?
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. I was just saying about Ava's question is really actually, without giving the spoiler at the end, is actually what the fundamental question the book asks. So the daughter looking for accountability, trying to make her father accountable, and what happens. And it seems to me that is like exactly what the drama, or what thwarts that, or what enables that.
Yes, absolutely. It's just I think it's as you said to me, the whole point of the book really is because exactly what happened. So it's what do you do with that knowledge? And for this particular family, they made their particular choice, and I think maybe every family makes that choice, for good or evil. Yeah.
Hi Florence, it was great to hear you reading your work. Can you tell us about Tragedies in France, and did you ever send that story out into the world?
Okay. Tragedies in France was written when I was 9 on my brother Sean's old exercise copy. I can still see it's yellow, the cover. And I wrote this story. I spelt tragedies tragically wrong. I'd never been to France, but that did not stop me from writing what I called my novel. And France to me was such an exotic place because I'd never been there. But sadly, the novel disappeared before I could take it any further. I'd love to see it now, but it just mysteriously disappeared one day, and so that was the end of Tragedies in France.
Hi, yes. As a writer, hearing about your methods of writing and different things, would you say the term of write what you know, did you find any obstacles in bringing maybe personal or using your past of being brought up in Sligo, or even, as you said, Tragedies in France? Was there any obstacles on that of writing as you know, or anything that came between that?
Well, can I just say, when I write what you know, my father was not a serial killer, a lovely, very moral man. But certainly, I think because I was writing about Sligo and about an area I knew and was familiar to me, it was much easier. And see, the thing about it is about write what you know. I think what I know about could be very boring. So I kind of feel I want to let my imagination go into places and maybe find out a little bit about, like for instance in the second book I'm writing, I'm not going to talk about it, but it's something that's outside my experience, but it's something I'm interested in. But I think you're right. I think you have to start somewhere that's familiar, that you can kind of hang things on. And particularly for me, because as I said, I am a baby writer. I have so much to learn. I did not, do what you students here have done and gone and studied the craft. And I've just kind of, chanced my arm, really. And I've just been lucky. And I just kept going. I suppose that's the only thing. And I eventually stopped trying to talk myself out of writing, and stopped procrastinating and just sat down and did it. But yeah.
I should point out that I think the man who asked that question he's not in our course, but he does write, and fair play to him, because he's also done it on his own. Was it Dylan that asked? Yes.
Hi, Florence. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how polished do you think your manuscript was when you sent it in, and when it was taken on by the publishers? Had you much rewriting to do on it, or was there any stuff that you were kind of hesitant to change, or that type of thing?
Yes, I mean there were some change. Like there's an extra 2 chapters in it, I don't think, that were in the original one, and the ending was changed. But other than that, there wasn't a massive amount. I mean, there was obviously, clunky sentences that I had to look at, but no, it wasn't a massive amount.
A good few rewrites of
Yes.
it before you sent it in. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Yes.
Okay,
I've lost
yeah.
count of how many rewrites I
Right.
did. Some of them were major rewrites. Some of them were just maybe changing a few things. But there were a lot of drafts.
Okay, thanks, Florence. Well done. Thank you.
Hi, Florence. Just a quick question. I was wondering, so when you wrote the book, you didn't realise nearly that it was a crime novel? And I'm wondering, is there pressure from publishers that because you've written one in the crime genre, or where they would place it in the crime genre, do you feel that you're next and the one after, and hopefully lots more, that you can change that if you feel like it? Or have you just stick with that genre?
That's a great question. I think that the publishers basically have an idea of where on the bookshelves my book is going to fit, and I think it's crime genre. And I think, I don't know where else you'd put the book in. It's certainly not romantic fiction, and it's, it does have a lot of those elements. It's not a police procedural. It's not a spy thriller, but it still fits somewhere on that bookshelf, I think. So I would say, certainly I think my agreement with Poolbeg would be that I would be putting out books that would be on, obviously very different from each other, but would be safe to fit on that bookshelf somewhere. So.
Hi, Florence. I'm just wondering, who are your influences of writers yourself? Like, who do you read, and did you have a subconscious influence in your writing style as a result?
No, that's interesting, because if I was to tell you what I read, it would make no sense what I wrote, because I'm a total Jane Austen fan, and I love Anthony Trollope. I also love Agatha Christie. I love P.J. Woodhouse. So I love, there's so many genres, and I mean, P.D. James. I mean, I do read a lot of crime fiction, but I think I just love reading so many different things. I don't have a particular, this is just what I read. The main thing, I think, the one thing that actually has helped me is that I have read so much over my life. And I think everything you read, it helps you, improves something in you, even the way you think and your imagination and ideas. So I would be very wide ranging in my reading style.
Okay, so turn it up. No, so thank you everyone so much for your questions and for coming tonight and being so gracious to Florence. We are going to turn it over to the open mic, and I think Hazel is going to present.
See if I get this right. Hi guys, so I'm Hazel O'Grady. I'm a student in HU and I'm doing the Writing and Literature course, which Una is the coordinator for. Today I'm going to be introducing the open mic, and the first person is, well, myself. I'm just going to read a small poem here called Lambing Season. Very not on topic, unfortunately. Spring glass glistens as morning dew lingers, shining like snow crystals, crisp sea salty air, they breathe in and out. Glistening snouts, snowy coats, stripe of blue, red bleed, a mauve marking. Grinding clumps of grass for two, now pulled by their legs, water bag breaking, as lamb falls to ground, covered in blood. Curled, unfurled, as mother tenderly licks off the blood. Shaky legs, lamb stands, swaying like a toddler taking their first steps. Latched at mother's side in field, a baby cotton cloud, greedily suckling milk, hopping tall grass with siblings. Morphing with time, the miracle is seen through foggy windows, as a lamb now a mother grazing, a baby cotton cloud suckling at her side. Thank you, everybody. And next up we have Shay Fahy.
Hi. So I wrote this poem, conceived of it sitting in a pub, because I don't think you can be a writer and have a pint without thinking, I'm sure I can find inspiration for a character or a story here somewhere. So hopefully it works out, and I hope you enjoy. It's called Nightclub Nausea. Can you see me from up there, Daddy? Through the thick cloud of smoke I've created for myself. The tail end of a generic song provides some white noise as we stand huddled around an ashtray like a flaming bin. I try and look deep in thought with each deliberative drag. Weak attempts at accidental eye contact don't seem to be resonating well with the local bevy. If we stand still, all we'll attract is pigeons. Onward, chaps, to the dance floor. But alas, my lungs are blackened, and I can't bawl loudly enough to be heard over this strident tripe. Conversation is so dull, I've resorted to reading the signs on the wall. Maximum occupancy 200. Of those, how many are pretending to enjoy it? Is boozing an acquired taste? How many of you were dragged here under the guise of making memories? And how many of a maximum would rather be anywhere else in the world? I refuse to let this be the only outlet. 0 to 17, unimportant. Then he came of age, claimed a bar stool, and left a depressing imprint of wasted potential. Being the pampered thespian I am, I will carry on venturing to the opera and the theatre, even if I am to do so alone. For the nighttime scene, I must turn down the role. My legacy will continue beyond this cider-soaked cesspool. I won't die a sound lad. I will die a great man.
Thank you very much, Shay. That was lovely. Next up, we have my classmate, Rosaline Glennon.
Hi, everybody. This is a piece of prose. I'd been watching the bombed out shells of buildings in Mariupol, people losing family, becoming displaced, drinking melting snow, belongings all there one day, gone in minutes. Stacked homes on top of each other, every door jamb obliterated. I began to wonder about my own front door and how important it is to me. I've had front doors I shared with other people, flats, apartments, and a gorgeous apartment over a row of shops. I shared with a girl who was not very generous with her space. She had rules, kitchen rules. I lined my books up on the windowsill. In winter, condensation ran down the windows and formed a pool on the sill. She wasn't very happy. I was temping. I went to work every day in legal offices, accountant firms, answered phones in empty buildings. I joined a yoga class and fell into a group. I don't want to be buried here was the first thing I said when I arrived on a plane to live in Germany. A clothesline strung up between two pear trees in the garden was eating into the bark, squeezing the life out of them. I took it down. In yonder years, women in aprons swept their front step, a rectangular postage stamp of a garden, each side of their front door. They scutched and scutched a sweeping brush into the corners or rubbed on cardinal red polish. Women in housecoats leaning on brushes talked to a neighbour, a mirror image of herself, always referring to each other as Mrs. Kelly next door. City doors with one frosted glass panel, a letterbox with a key hanging down inside, letting in the latchkey kids with the Judy Urbino comics to keep them company. Years of paint on panels down the centre, a door flap at the bottom that had a sound. You get to know the sound of a front door slamming. You would know a person's mood. Don't take the door off the hinges. You could time people by the closing or opening of a door. Inside my childhood home, walking down the hall as far as the front door, we would model the checkered dresses my mother made for us. Do a twirl at the door, turn around, walk back into the dining room. We turned on the last circle of the pattern carpet closest to the front door. We had the only telephone on the road, the Bakelite kind with the dial. You had to put your finger in a hole with the number on it, replace the receiver in a cradle. Neighbours needed to make a call, or we had to take a call, deliver a message, a sad one. Someone was dying. Walton's last word on the radio. I lived on top floor flats and bedsits where the doorbell rang throughout the house. The about-town crowd had late night parties. Country students away from parental eyes, living their best lives, hindering my getting up or down the stairs where bodies and courting couples hang out. A deaf couple whose doorbell, when pressed, made a red light flash in their flat. A woman prison officer with a ferocious temper machine washed her clothes late at night. When the clothes reached the spin cycle, the china rattled on my dresser in my flat next door. I rattled too sometimes. She fought with her boyfriend in the laneway that runs to the rear. Boxing shadows loomed large on the wall from my upstairs window, where I listened to Randy Travis singing Forever and Ever, Amen. I've walked away, closed doors, sealed them. There are doors in my heart which will never be closed. In Dublin, I had an independent house with a storm porch to protect us from winds coming in from the coast. a tiny space between that door and the inside door, just enough to hang a plant or have an umbrella stand, a breaker before you get to the main door. The pleasure of closing that door, nobody can come in. The sun shone in front of the house, and I listened to David Gray sing, "Say hello and wave goodbye," which is something you do after all.
Thank you very much, Rosaline. That was beautiful. Next, we have Owen Leiden O'Connor.
Hi, everyone. I was initially a bit hesitant to read this out in front of you in case you'd all think I was a bit weird, but now that somebody asked that question and Florence answered it, it made me feel a bit more confident about this. This is a piece of genre fiction that I wrote. This is called A Human Named Rot. The day will come when I shall walk, when I shall breathe air and my heart will beat like yours. I shall be new. I shall be whole. I shall slither amongst you, and you will never know. I shall be flesh. There's something wrong with the school. Something rotten has sunk its teeth into the underbelly. Something that will spread throughout these halls. It will corrode this school. It's going to start soon. I can already smell it. It's inside the walls. We have to escape. Otherwise it will end all of us. In the hallway I am alone. Everyone else has retreated to the lunchroom, evacuated. The slithering comes into earshot. I pause, glancing back down the long way I've walked. It's inside the walls. It's all around me. I move towards the cinder block, cocking my head to one side to listen. There, I can hear it, moving through the wall, like a slug through mud, wet and slippery, sliding around inside. It whispers to me, I will be flesh. I will grow inside you all. I will live and inhabit. You will all feel me. Let me corrode you. Let me dry you out, shrivel you. You can't dig me out. I have no origin. I am without root. I am among you. It slithers away out of earshot. It knows I can hear it. It wants me to hear it. Annabelle. Ari calls me from down the hallway. Ari, I say, it's moving. It's getting worse. Where? Which direction? He looks down the hallway towards the lunchroom. It's killing us, I can feel it. In synchronization, our noses begin bleeding. Ari's isn't immediately noticeable from his dark skin, but soon it runs down his chin to hang at a drip. The two of us turn, and we both run as fast as we can towards the lunchroom, where most of the school has gathered. I try to open my mouth to scream a warning to the people inside through the doors, but my teeth begin to fall out, clattering against the floor like someone has thrown a handful of dice. The burning in my nose intensifies like chilies have flooded my sinuses. My eyes water, my nose runs and my ears ring. It's inside me. The flesh of the apple in my hand is bruised, brown, soft, and wrinkled, rotting from the inside out, just like us. When I press my thumb to it, it goes through, lodging deep in the fruit's mushy core. It hangs from my thumb before gravity pulls it loose, falling to the ground and bursting open. When I glance in the mirror, I use my fingers to pull back my lips and stare at the reflection of my gums. I see them recede rapidly, like a snail back into its shell. The rest of my teeth fall and tinkle against the sink, the air tingling my gums as it touches the nerves in the holes where the enamel used to sit. The rot will strip apart our flesh, layer by layer from the inside. The mirror glass is speckled with dots of black mold. My hair falls away as easily as the dusty wings of a moth, and I watch as my reflection becomes bald. The last few strands of blonde hair cling to my scalp like old cobwebs. Ari puts my arm around his bony, emaciated shoulders, and the two of us limp down the hall, trying to escape the corrupted school. If our venture is successful, if we can emerge from the clutches of the rot which has invaded everyone's bodies, our flesh may be too far gone. My heart might be blackened with it, my veins and arteries clogged. My arm is gone now. The flesh and muscles have been eaten away. The arm is stick thin and peeling, the socket barely attached. The empty arm swings like a rubber tube at my side, making me feel off balance. Every inch of the school has been overtaken by the mould now. The white plastered walls and ceilings of the place are blackened and scabbed. The air is cold and thick with contamination. The rot must be airborne, blowing in, settling into the walls, spreading all over the building. We breathe it in, inhale it into ourselves, down into our lungs and through our blood. It festers inside us, eating away, drying up our fluids, wasting our muscles, and brittling our bones, breaking our bodies down until we are no longer ourselves, until we are more rot than human. Human composed of nothing but rot. On legs the width of sticks, Ari carries me down to the end of the hallway and sets me down on the ground, leaning against the blackened walls. I see him gasp for air, his tongue black now, peeling away like my arm did. It flops out of his mouth and down onto the floor. Dark, rotten flesh, all the pink gone, like watching a smoker's lung erode in a time lapse. He lays down beside me, resting his head against the top of mine. Both of our bodies emaciated, ribs and collarbones jutting out, our bald heads flaky, and browned, chipped teeth rotting in our gums. Neither of us can talk or form words now, but it doesn't matter anymore. Not if we can lay here together and slip away peacefully. At the very end, it has eaten away inside our bodies, numbed and corroded us like it whispered to us that it would. But I'm thankful there is no more pain, thankful that my nerves are all gone. My last thoughts are of my mother, and I ask God if he can hear me to look after her. Hari exhales one final time beside me, his breath warm on my face, and I know it's okay to let go now. I close my eyes in the dark hallway, and everything begins to fade. The March sun comes out from behind the clouds outside, the rays burning through the mould that has covered the glass windows like black scabs. The rays cross the floor and reach my body, warming me. The lukewarm heat is the last thing I feel. Maybe it is God letting me know he heard my prayer, and he will watch over Mum for me. And the rest is silence. Thank you.
That was amazing. We've had such a varied open mic tonight, so it was really good, and thank you everybody for getting involved. I just want to say thank you to Florence, Una and Ruth this evening, with Florence and Una first of all, for this wonderful evening, and we've had such a variety of authors over the years, and every time we get a new author, we learn something new. It's been brilliant, and this evening was no different. It's just been a fascinating discussion about writing and the novel itself. Our lineup for 2023 is looking very exciting, so you can add your details to our contact list at the desk to find out what's happening over the next year, and we can send you out emails of what's coming on, and check our social media platforms for details. I just want to, at this moment, I'd just like to thank Studio Row for helping us with the tech support for this evening. And I want to thank Hazel O'Grady from ATU Sligo, who has been supporting us for the Word this month, who's been just a really great help. I just want to take this moment as well to say how deeply Sligo Library regrets the passing of our former colleague and retired county librarian, John McTiernan. I'm not sure if some of you had met him while he was here. He was a massive presence in Sligo Library and in Sligo itself, an author, historian and genealogist. Our condolences to his family and friends during this time. He'll be fondly remembered as a great colleague for his tireless work to document the history of Sligo and its people, and for his generosity in helping other historians. And we have a significant collection of his work here, so if you ever want to look into how significant his contribution is, you should have a look at what we have. So our next Word episode will take place on Wednesday the 22nd of February, and we are now going to finish with a final song from Ruth Clinton, who's just been amazing tonight, and I love that middle song and I want to find out more about that actually. But yeah, Ruth is going to finish with a final song. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Gur mágad agus lán. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, and it was great to get to hear you, Dali. So I'm going to sing a song called The Trees Grow Tall. Again, it's another old ballad and there's millions of versions, but this one is probably close to Joe Heaney's version, I'd say. The trees, they grow tall, and the grass, it grows green. The time has come and passed, my love, since you and I have been. It's a cold and bitter night, my love, that I lie here alone. My bunny boy was young, but he's gone. Oh, Father, dearest Father, you did to me what's wrong when you married me to the bunny boy whose age it was too young. For he was scarce 16 years, and I was 21. My bunny boy was young and growing. Oh, daughter, dearest daughter, I did to you no wrong when I married you to the bunny boy whose age it was too young. For he'd proved to be a man to you when I was dead and gone. Your bunny boy was young and growing. But daughter, dearest daughter, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send your love to college for another year or two. And whilst he's at college, he'll wear a ribbon blue. So the girls will all know that he's married. As I went down by the college wall, I spied 24 college boys all playing with a ball. And it's there I spied my own true love, the fairest of them all. My bunny boy was young and growing, and at the age of 16 he was a married man, and at the age of 17 the father to a son. And at the age of 18 years, over his grave the grass grew green. Cruel death had put an end to his growing. I'll make my love a shroud of the ornamental brown, and whilst I sit and tears they will roll down. I will weep and I will mourn him, oh, till the day I die. But I'll rear his bonny son whilst he's growing. Sinead.